A man froze to death in this country last winter wearing $1,100 of technical clothing. Not in the wilderness, not on a mountain. He was less than a mile from a road, dressed better than any trapper who ever worked these woods, and he died of the same thing that killed men in 1840. The gear was not the problem. The gear was superb. He didn't know the 6 or 7 things a 14-year-old farm kid knew in 1890 without being taught, because they were simply how you lived through January. I've spent 51 winters where the heat comes out of a stove I fed myself. And I'll tell you what I've come to believe. Warmth is not a product. It never was. It is a set of decisions made in the right order, mostly for free. Everything I'm about to give you is older than the light bulb. Not one of them needs a battery, and the whole list works whether you spend $1,100 or $11. Number 1. Wool, and never cotton. If you keep one thing out of this entire video, keep this one, because it's the one that kills. Cotton absorbs water into the fiber itself, and then it stops insulating completely. A soaked cotton shirt doesn't just fail to keep you warm, it actively strips heat off you, because now you've got a cold, wet layer bonded to your skin conducting your own heat away. Wet cotton is worse than bare skin. That isn't an expression, it is literally worse. Wool is a different animal. The fiber is naturally crimped and it holds pockets of air even when it's soaked, so wet wool still insulates. It's the reason every mountain man, every sailor, every soldier who had a choice wore wool for 400 years. They weren't being traditional. They'd watched what happened to the men who weren't. Blue jeans, cotton socks, a cotton undershirt, a hooded sweatshirt. That is the uniform most Americans put on to go outside in winter, and it is the worst possible combination there is. Wool socks, wool base layer, wool sweater. If wool itches you, the fine merino doesn't. And a wool blanket from a surplus store costs less than a tank of gas and has kept more people alive than every technical fabric ever invented. Number 2. Be bold, start cold. This is the old Teamsters rule, and it sounds backward until you understand what it's protecting you from. When you step outside to work, hauling wood, walking out shoveling, you should be slightly uncomfortably cold for the first 5 minutes. If you leave the house perfectly comfortable, you are already overdressed for what you're about to do. And within 15 minutes, you'll be sweating. Sweat is the thing that kills you in winter, not cold. Sweat. You soak your layers from the inside, then you stop working, and now you're standing still in wet clothing at 10 degrees with no way to dry out. Men have died from the walk-in, not the night. So dress for the work, not for the doorway. Be cold at the start. You'll be right in 10 minutes. Number 3. Vent before you sweat, not after. Same principle, and this is the practical half of it. The moment you feel yourself starting to warm past comfortable, you open something. Take the hat off first, you shed enormous heat through your head, and it's the fastest valve you own. Then the neck, then unbutton, then a layer comes off entirely and goes in the pack. Grandfather worked in stages and he was constantly adjusting. Hat on, hat off, sleeves up, coat open, coat shut. It looked like fussing. It was thermal management, and he did it by feel every few minutes without thinking about it. Once you're wet, you have no good options. Before you're wet, you have all of them. The entire skill is acting early. Number 4. Get off the ground before you do anything else. Cold ground doesn't cool you the way cold air does. It conducts direct contact, no pause, and it will pull heat out of you many times faster than the air ever could. Water and wet earth move heat something like 25 times better than still air does, which means a man in a good sleeping bag lying directly on frozen dirt is in more danger than a man in a blanket lying on 8 inches of dry evergreen boughs. The bough bed is the oldest fix there is. Cut armfuls of dead dry evergreen branches, lay them stems down and shingled, and pile them until it looks absurd, because it compresses to half what you laid. You're not building a mattress. You're building a layer of trapped air between you and the thing that's eating you. No boughs, dry leaves, dry grass, cattail fluff. Your pack, your rope, cardboard, the floor mats out of the truck, anything at all that isn't ground. Number 5. The hot stone in the bedroll. Put a few fist-sized dry stones near the fire. Near it, not in it. For an hour or so before bed. Wrap one in a wool sock or a piece of blanket and put it at your feet under the covers. It'll hold heat for hours, and it warms you from the feet, which is exactly where it matters, because cold feet will keep a man awake all night no matter how warm the rest of him is. 2 hard warnings. Never use stones out of a creek bed or any porous rock. Trapped moisture turns to steam, and they can crack apart with real force, and always wrap it. A bare, hot stone will burn you in your sleep, and you may not wake up until it has. Number 6. Soapstone and the bed warmer, the refined version, and every house had one. Soapstone holds heat longer than nearly anything else you can put on a stove. Families kept a slab on the back of the range all evening, wrapped it in flannel at bedtime, and slid it under the quilts. Brickwork, too. So did a covered pan of coals on a long handle, run between the sheets to take the chill out before anyone got in. Because here's the thing about an unheated bedroom in February. The bed itself is cold, and your body has to spend an hour of its own heat warming that mattress before you're comfortable. Warming the bed first means you keep that hour. A modern hot water bottle does the identical job. It is a 200-year-old idea, and it still outperforms turning up a thermostat you're paying for. Number 7. Build the reflector wall. An open fire throws its heat in straight lines in every direction, which means without a wall behind it, you are heating 100 acres of empty forest and catching whatever fraction happens to be aimed at you. Stack green logs into a low wall on the far side of the fire, or set it against a rock face, or against a cut bank. Everything that would have gone into the dark comes back at you instead. It roughly doubles what that fire does for you, and it costs 20 minutes of work. Set your shelter on one side, the fire in the middle, the wall on the far side, and you're sitting in a pocket of heat instead of beside a light. Number 8. Make the fire long, not tall. A tall fire is for looking at. A long fire is for sleeping beside. Lay 2 big logs side by side, parallel, a bit longer than your body, with a hand's width of gap between them. Build your coal bed down that gap. Now the heat comes at your whole length evenly, instead of roasting your chest while your feet freeze. It burns slow because the logs feed each other and the flame is contained. It doesn't need tending every hour. And it means you can lie down full length in the warm instead of curling up beside a bonfire, turning over every 40 minutes like meat on a spit. That's the fire people actually slept beside for thousands of years. The bonfire is a modern habit, and it's a poor one. Number 9. Fat wood and birch bark. Fire when everything is wet. In winter, everything you'd normally use for tinder is soaked or frozen, and this is where most people fail. 2 things don't care. Birch bark is loaded with oil and will take a flame while wet, straight off the tree, and it burns hot enough to dry what's above it. Peel the loose papery outer bark. Never strip a live tree bare. Fat wood is better still. When a pine dies, resin concentrates in the stump and in the joints where the branches met the trunk. That wood becomes saturated with pitch. It's heavy, it's amber-colored, it smells like turpentine when you cut it. It lights from a spark in the rain and it burns like a candle. Find a rotten pine stump, dig into the heart of it with a hatchet, and you'll pull out enough fat wood to start 100 fires. Shave it fine. Keep a handful in your coat. Number 10. Keep your tinder against your body. The oldest habit, and the one nobody's told anymore. Tinder, matches, a lighter, none of them belong in your pack in winter. They belong in an inside pocket against your chest, where your own body heat keeps them dry and warm. A butane lighter at 10 degrees will barely produce a flame. It needs to be warmed in your fist for a minute before it works at all. And most people standing in the cold with numb hands don't know that and conclude, it's broken. Matches pick up moisture from the air and fail. Damp tinder won't take a spark at all. Every trapper carried his fire on his person, not on his sled. If your sled goes through the ice, you still have fire. That's the whole reasoning, and it's still right. Number 11. Mittens over gloves always. Gloves separate your fingers, and separated fingers each have to keep themselves warm with the small blood supply they've got. Mittens let all 4 share heat in one pocket. A mitten will outperform a glove of identical material every time. That's not preference, it's just how the heat works. Best system is the old one. A thin liner glove inside a loose wool mitten so you can slip a hand out for fine work and get it back in immediately. And the mitten wants to be loose. A tight mitten crushes the air out of the insulation and cuts off circulation, which is exactly how a hand gets frozen inside expensive gear. Same rule for boots. If your boot is tight with a thick sock in it, that boot is too small and it will freeze your toes faster than a loose boot with a thin sock. Number 12. Newspaper, straw, and what people used before insulation had a brand. Trapped air is all insulation has ever been, and dead plant matter traps air beautifully. Newspaper under a shirt or a coat cuts wind and adds real warmth, which is why men without money have used it for 100 years, and why cyclists still stuff a paper down the front on a cold descent. Straw or dry grass stuffed loosely into an oversized boot works the same way. It's what the Dutch and the Germans and half the northern world did in wooden shoes, and it's why they wore them a size big. Dry grass between two pairs of socks. Dry moss inside a mitten. Leaves packed into a coat lining. None of it is comfortable. All of it works. And it's available anywhere you happen to be standing at any hour for nothing. Number 13. Dry your socks with your own body. Damp socks at bedtime become frozen socks by morning, and there's no fire hot enough to fix that at 5 a.m. The old way is to wring them out as dry as you can, then put them flat against your torso under your shirt overnight, around your waist, against your stomach, inside the base layer. Your body puts out heat all night whether you use it or not. By morning, they're dry, or close. Same for tomorrow's boot liners, same for damp mittens. It costs nothing and it's slightly unpleasant for about 10 minutes, then you don't notice. And this is why you carry 2 pairs and change them at midday. Dry feet in winter aren't a comfort. They're the whole job. Number 14. Never breathe into your bedding. Everyone does this. It's cold, so you pull the blanket up over your face and breathe into the warm pocket. You exhale a remarkable amount of water vapor every hour. All of it goes into the blanket or the bag, where it condenses in the insulation. One night of that, and your bedding is measurably damp. 3 nights and it's lost most of what it was doing for you, and you cannot dry it in the field in winter. Face out. Always. Wear a wool hat and wrap a scarf around the outside of your nose and mouth if you need to. The scarf gets wet and the scarf is a thing you can dry. That scarf does a second job, by the way. Breathing through wool pre-warms and moistens the air before it hits your lungs, which matters more than people think in hard cold. Number 15. Eat fat before you sleep. Your body is a furnace, and at night it runs on what you last put in it. Fat is the slow fuel. It digests over hours and produces heat the whole way through, which is exactly what you want between midnight and dawn. Sugar burns fast and leaves you cold at 2 in the morning. Protein is somewhere in between. Pemmican was fat and dried meat, and it was the standard winter travel food across this continent for a reason. Grandmother put butter on everything in January, and nobody in that house was overweight because they were burning it in the yard. A spoon of fat, a piece of hard cheese, a handful of nuts before you lie down. A cold sleeper is very often just an underfueled one. And drink water. Dehydration in winter is common, and it makes you far more vulnerable to the cold, because you don't feel thirsty at 20 degrees, and so you don't drink. Number 16. Bank the house. Every farmhouse in the north got skirted in the fall, and almost nobody does it now. You pile straw, leaves, corn stalks, or evergreen boughs against the foundation, all the way around, a couple of feet deep, held in place with boards or burlap. Sometimes they'd pack earth against it. That belt of dead air stops the wind from getting under the floor and stealing heat out from below, which is where a lot of a house's heat goes and where nobody looks. Farm families did it every autumn as a matter of course, cleared it in the spring so nothing rotted, and it made an unheatable house heatable. It works exactly as well today, and snow, once it comes, is doing the same job, which is why you don't clear the drift off the north wall. That drift is insulation, and it's free. Number 17. Snow is insulation, not the enemy. This is the one that turns winter from an enemy into a material. Still air is what insulates, and snow is mostly still air held in a structure. A snow cave or a quingy, properly built, sits near freezing inside no matter what the air outside does, and near freezing is warm when it's 20 below out there. 2 rules that make it survivable rather than dangerous. You must have a ventilation hole, punched through the roof and kept clear, because you'll use up the air. And your sleeping platform must be higher than the entrance because cold air sinks. It will pool in the low entry and leave you in the warm above it. Animals have known this forever. The grouse dives into a snowdrift to roost. The fox curls under it. They aren't enduring the snow, they're using it. Number 18. Heat the person, not the house. Before central heat, nobody tried to warm a whole house because it was impossible. So they didn't. The family lived in one room with the stove in it. The rest of the house got shut off in November and stayed shut until March, doors closed, sometimes with a quilt hung over the doorway. Beds had heavy curtains or a canopy. That wasn't decoration. That was a small enclosed space around a sleeping body that your own heat could actually warm. They put a bench right against the stove. They kept the kettle on it. They sat close. The whole philosophy is inverted from ours, and theirs is the efficient one. If the power goes out this winter, don't try to heat your house. Pick one small room, preferably one with south-facing windows. Hang blankets over the doorways and the windows at night and live in it. You can keep one room livable with almost nothing. You cannot keep a house. Number 19. The wind matters more than the temperature. Ask a man who's worked outside all his life whether he'd rather have 10 degrees and calm or 30 degrees and a hard wind, and he'll take the 10 every time. Moving air strips the thin layer of warmed air off your skin and off the outside of your clothing continuously, and it drives cold straight through any fabric that isn't windproof. A wool sweater with nothing over it is nearly useless in wind and excellent under a shell, which is why the first thing the old-timers did, picking a camp, wasn't looking for a pretty spot. It was finding the lee, behind a ridge, in the trees, on the downwind side of a big rock, under a cut bank. Never the top of a hill, never the middle of an open field, and never the bottom of a hollow either, because that's where the cold air settles overnight. A tarp rigged as a windbreak on one side will do more for you than a second blanket. Block the wind first. Everything else works better afterward. Number 20. Set up tomorrow before you go to bed. The last one isn't a trick. It's the habit that held all the others together. Kindling split fine and brought inside to dry overnight, sitting by the stove. Tomorrow's wood under cover, not under snow. Water carried in before dark so the pump doesn't have to be thawed at dawn. Boots by the stove, not by the door. Axe hung up where you'll find it, not left in the snow where it'll be under 6 inches by morning. Because here's what winter does that no other season does. It takes away your ability to fix mistakes. In July, forgetting the kindling costs you 15 minutes. In January at 5 in the morning, in the dark, with hands that don't work yet, and a house that's down to 40 degrees, forgetting the kindling is a genuine problem. The old people weren't organized because they were tidy. They were organized because winter punishes improvisation, and they'd all watched it happen to somebody. 20 of them. And look at what they cost. Wool instead of cotton. Boughs under you. A stone by the fire. A wall behind it. A scarf outside your face instead of a blanket over it. A spoon of fat. 1 room instead of 6. Kindling brought in at night. That's the whole list. And there isn't a receipt in it. The man I told you about at the start had better equipment than any trapper who ever lived. He had every advantage that 400 years of progress could hand him. What he didn't have was a grandfather who made him bring the kindling in. We didn't get soft. We got specialized. We bought the answer instead of learning it, and the answer works right up until the moment it's wet or dead or back at the truck. Learn 4 of these this week, not 24. Do them while it's still autumn, and getting them wrong costs you an afternoon instead of a life. I'm Samuel Pecker. The cold doesn't care what you paid.